Alright, welcome back everyone to the seasonal wrap-up show. This time we are diving into the spring 2024 season. I'm finally almost caught up on seasonals because I'm starting this literally as the spring season is coming to an end. So we got 48 shows total. If you're new to the seasonal wrap-up show, basically I do a bunch of randoms in a row from this list, and then at the end of each video I pull from what I call my end cap shows down here. So our end caps for this season are Delicious in Dungeon, Laid Back Camp Season 3, Mushoku Tensei Season 2 Part 2, Jellyfish Can't Swim at Night, Konosuba Season 3, Girls Band Cry, and Sound Euphonium Season 3. A lot of Season 3s. And as for this little thing down here, I've got my predictions on the minimum amount of shows I'll finish, which is 15, or anime that I'll finish, 15, and my expected maximum is 22. I've already watched 3 movies from this season. That was Haikyuu, The Dumpster Battle, Spy Family, Code White, and Blue Lock episode Nagi, so those are taken into account in those numbers. So without further ado, let's dive into the list. But as usual, I like to start the season with like a single episode thing that I know I'm going to finish, usually. So we're going to lead off with Girls und Panzer Das Finale Part 4. I've been slowly catching up on the Girls und Panzer franchise and been having a fun time with it. So let's watch some tank battles. Alright, starting off the spring seasonals with a bang. I just watched Girls und Panzer Das Finale Part 4. This is the 4th of 6 short films from the absolute madman genius Tsutomu Mizushima, that I presume is wrapping up the Girls und Panzer franchise for good, probably. Because he's been working on this for a fucking while. I think 2012 was the original TV series? Somewhere around there. And I watched it back in like 2014 or something, somewhere around there. And I thought, on my first viewing, I was like, yeah, this is fine, I guess, it's alright. And that was before I had developed an obsession with Tsutomu Mizushima. If you haven't heard me talk about him before, I'm not sure how, but if you haven't, Tsutomu Mizushima is one of like my top 3 favorite currently working anime directors. He has done, obviously, Girls und Panzer. He also did Magnificent Kotobuki, Squid Girl, Joshiraku, Another, Mayoiga, Shirobako. Just so many really good anime, or just really weird anime. And he also directed another TV series in the spring season, which I think is called Train at the End of the World or something. Very much looking forward to when I get to that. But for Girls und Panzer specifically, I've been catching up on the franchise over the past like 6 months or so. I rewatched the TV series and liked it a lot more than I did the first time, and then I've been just binging all the movies and OVAs ever since. And Das Finale Part 4 is pretty dang solid. It is. Now, with the Das Finale movies so far, I liked the first 2 the best, because not only did they have really hype tank battles, but also they had a lot of Mizushima's trademark insano comedy. The 3rd and 4th movies, not quite as much. The 4th movie was a little better at it, but like the 3rd movie was is probably the low point of the films for me so far, which is to say that instead of being really good, it was just good. So I'm really enjoying these movies so far. But this one, part 4 in particular, they're facing off against its like continuation high school or whatever, which is, I guess, supposed to be Finland is the country that they are mimicking here, because they have one of their tank operators is like a sniper, and so I guess that's supposed to be like a reference to the White Death, who was like a famous Finnish sniper during World War II. So fun little reference there. But because like the continuation high school has been in the franchise for a while, and I've been like, and it wasn't until the end of the third movie that I was like, oh, I guess they're Finland. I was trying to figure out what they were until then. But yeah, so the third movie was interesting because it ended with our main tank. I'm blanking on their names for some reason. Like, our main group of like 5 girls, they get knocked out real early into the battle, and so the rest of the battle we spend with all of the other side characters, and that's what the majority of the fourth movie is. And so I think that was a really smart decision, because it forced Mizushima to work with these side characters a lot more and really flesh them out, with whether it's the student council girls or the volleyball team or the history nerds, the gamers, the weird seafaring crew. They're one of my favorites. I absolutely loved their introduction in Death Finale Part 1. But it forced the focus to spread out a little more amongst all of the teams, instead of just centering itself on our main crew. I don't know why I'm blanking on the main character's name. I know why. It's because there's like 80,000 fucking characters in this. But yeah, I think that was a really smart move, and the banter was really solid. What I love about what makes Mizushima stand out for me, at least in terms of like Girls in Panzer, is there's not normally with like zany anime comedy, it's sort of like, it's kind of based on like manzai comedy, where you'll have like one or two people do something really stupid and insane, and then you'll have someone react to it by going like, that's insane, or are you stupid, or something like that. That's like the typical anime comedy. What Mizushima does is he just cuts out the second part and then just layers as many of the first part in a row as possible. It's just like rapid fire fucking nonsense, and it's hilarious. It's the way, and only he could do that, in my opinion, just because his directing style fits that the most. He is a very fast-paced director. He loves constantly keeping momentum going, and that's what makes his stuff so watchable. If you want like an even more insane version of that, watch Myoiga, The Lost Village, which has a controversial reputation. I liked it. I thought it was weird enough for me. But also what makes Mizushima such a phenomenal director is his action directing. Is probably he is the best vehicular combat director in the industry, bar none. There is no one better at vehicles fighting each other than Tsutomu Mizushima. Whether it's Girls in Panzer or Magnificent Kotobuki was where I really started to figure that out about him, where he's like, he loves POV shots, he loves putting the camera up close and personal on these tanks in various angles, showing various parts of the tanks and so on. And it's kind of like being on a thrill ride to some extent. Just this, you can feel yourself lurching along with the tanks sometime as they're getting thrown around on the battlefield. And the part 4 in particular, there's this very, very long chase sequence down a mountain. It borders on becoming too long, but I think it manages to save it by segmenting it enough to still maintain interest. And one of the ways that he's maintains interest in that scene, in this downhill chase, is the sound editing and the cuts, and just, it is an audio, like, if you want to see someone be really blatant with their editing, watch this downhill chase in part 4. It is like the way that the cuts are timed together with the rhythmic pounding of the tank shells and the tanks crashing into each other and the scraping, and also there's music layered on top of it, and the cuts and the sound effects are often in time with the music, and it creates this rhythmic, hypnotic, fascinating scene. Speaking of sound, by the way, I don't get to talk about sound design very much with anime because it's just kind of an afterthought a lot of the times, but Mizushima's sound design is really fucking good. Or should I say, his sound director's sound design is really fucking good. I forget what his name is, but he is also the sound director for JoJo, so that makes sense. It's very loud and bombastic and in your face, and it has like this distinctness to it. It doesn't feel like they just slapped some Foley work on and called it a day. There is very deliberate sound work in Girls in Panzer, and it's very much present in part 4 with all of that downhill chase, the rhythmicness of it. I was gonna say something else. I forgot what it was. Oh, so yeah, most of part 4 was the versus continuation high school battle. That was really great. And then we had the other semifinal match, which was apparently the Black Forest, I guess is the name of the school. The German team versus St. Gloriana, which is the British team. And I'll be honest, they kept me guessing about which school was going right up until there was one particular moment, because I was kind of like, well, okay, so if the German team wins, that seems obvious because they were the final opponent at the end of the TV series, so this would be like a rematch, but also that might be kind of repetitive. And then as their battle went on, I was like, they're introducing a lot of new side characters for the British team that I've never seen before. It is within Mizushima's realm of purview to just do that, just create random side characters and throw them away. But I was like, these seem too distinctive to just be one-offs. And then there was a point near the end of the battle where they revealed that Alice, who made her debut in the first Girls in Panzer movie before Das Finale started, that she had joined St. Gloriana. And so I was like, oh, okay, here we fucking go. So at that point I was like, okay, so the St. Gloriana is going to win now. It was a very fun reveal. I got very excited. It's like you're just seeing like one of your favorite characters come back after being gone for so long. Very fun. Yeah, if you've been sleeping on Girls in Panzer up until now and you want to watch some really weird fucking anime that's also really good, definitely check out Girls in Panzer. Oh, I also watched the OVA that was packaged with the Blu-ray release for this one, this one was called Commander War. It's probably my least favorite of the Das Finale OVAs so far, but it still had some fun stuff to it, which also, both this OVA and Part 4, and Girls in Panzer as a whole, and his directing omnibus as a whole, really. Mizushima loves music. Like, he loves having his characters sing, and do like songs and stuff and do like, it's so fun, and he makes it silly and stupid and like just the vibes are nice, and the OVA ends with this really dumb song. It's so funny. So yeah, Girls in Panzer, still good. I'm going to eventually. I'm going to devote just a giant amount of time to doing like a deep dive into Mizushima because he is such a fascinating director to me. But for now, let's move on to the rest of this list. Alright, Das Finale Part 4 is complete. We're going to scroll up and put you in the number 7 spot for now with a light 8. Love Girls in Panzer. Fun times. Okay, now, time to get into the random parts of this list. We got 40 random shows plus our end caps. So let's see what we roll as our first random show. It's going to be 37. Pretty low on the list. What is that? The Grimm Variations. This is some kind of Netflix OVA or something. Have not heard anyone talk about it. Let's find out what it'll do. What a baffling series of artistic decisions. I got, how far in this? I got like 6 minutes into the Grimm Variations. So many weird choices. So, the premise for this, I guess, is it's about Grimm fairy tales, you know, Cinderella, Snow White, so on and so forth, whatever the Grimm fairy tales are. But reframed from an alternate perspective, instead of the brothers Grimm, it's from the perspective of their sister, Charlotte. And yes, I had to look it up, and no, there is no Charlotte Grimm. This is as far as I know, they just decided to give the brothers Grimm a sister, a fictional sister. Okay. And the opening, like, framing device where it shows us this, like, it shows the brothers Grimm writing this stuff, it looks, the aesthetic makes it look unfinished. Like, look, the frame count is, like, lower than you think it should be. It's got this sort of, like, pastelish, almost crayon-y kind of texture to it that makes it look like, if you've ever seen like the raw key animation for anime, it has a similar aesthetic, which confused the hell out of me. So, and I was like, oh god, is the whole show gonna look like this? And then no, after the most boring OP ever with this really fucking terrible easy listening track with no lyrics, it just cuts to a generic Wit Studio animation style. This is by Wit Studio, by the way. Doesn't look like them outside of what the character designs look like. I will say the color design is okay. It's a little too rich in some areas, but it at least looks polished once we get to like the actual animation. But so, okay. So then we start, the first episode is on Cinderella. Also, these are double-length episodes. There's absolutely no fucking reason for that, I don't think. And the first episode is Cinderella, and another baffling decision. They don't just make it
Cinderella. They give it like a Japanese coat of paint and change all the names. You titled the episode Cinderella, but then you renamed all of the characters to make it Japanese. Why didn't you just do... If we're reframing... If the point of the show is to reframe it as those German-ass dudes writing this story, and then their sister, named Charlotte, retelling it, why is it in Japan now? What the fuck? It's baffling. I don't... Did they just forget that part? I don't get it. And also, it's very obvious that they're reframing it so that the Cinderella character, who is named Kyoko now, is like the bad guy, probably. And they're reframing it so that like the stepmother and the stepsisters are good, actually. And like, listen, there are some things you can critique about the Grimm fairy tales, most notably about how a lot of their lessons are about how women need to know their place, and i.e. don't get in a man's way and just do what you're told. So there is room to critique. But you're opening on Cinderella, where all of the primary characters are women. And it seems like you're starting this series by creating an antagonistic relationship between the female characters for no reason other than to turn the story around? I am utterly baffled by this show. What did I just watch? Fuck it.
Okay, before we move on, I just need to show you the male plot synopsis for this show. 6 stories will be developed as an anthology with a new interpretation of Grimm's fairy tales, incorporating dark elements. Dark elements. Do you not know what the Grimm fairy tales are? Oh my god. We're gonna take this fucking show off the list. And we're gonna roll again. Crank the number generator down. It's gonna be 29. What is 29? Tonari no Youkai-san. Again, I have not heard anyone talk about this show. I know literally nothing except that it's got yokai in it. So, rough translation is like my yokai neighbor, probably. Not a huge fan of yokai stuff in general, but let's give it a shot.
Alright, well, I didn't outright dislike that one, but man, there's really not a lot going on here outside of like the core premise. So I apologize for probably the next week-ish of recordings, because it's 4th of July week, so you're just gonna hear that. I got a little bit into the first episode of Tonari no Youkai-san. I do like the setup for this, where it's basically just like, yeah, yokai are just around and everyone just treats them kind of normally. They're just like facts of life, and they're very friendly. I like that premise. Like, we have this neighborly Tengu guy who just is walking around. The show opens with a guy's cat turning into a Nekomata, which is like the cat, like the split-tailed cat. Apparently there's like a yokai registry service, basically, and for like newly birthed yokai. It's a fun concept. It's just really kind of boring. Like, the actual execution is just kind of boring. This is a slice of life ass slice of life. And I don't have anything against slice of life as a genre. There are plenty in the past that I've vibed with, but most of those looked really good. And this one doesn't look bad, and it certainly has its own unique aesthetic, but it's not like super good looking. It's like C plus or B minus tier animation. It's fine. Everything looks fine, but it doesn't look great. It's just kind of... It's lacking in anything that really hooks me aside from the actual premise. So, yeah, I don't have anything against this one. It's just, there's nothing about it that's sinking its teeth into me, which I guess is sort of the habit for slice of life stuff. But again, there have been others in the past that have sunk their teeth into me. This one just didn't.
Okay. Tonari no Youkai-san off the list. Let's roll again and see what we get. It's gonna be 34. Hitting all the low numbers today. Ninja Kamui. Okay. Did not hear anyone talk about this one. I think this was a Tonari production, if I recall correctly. But I didn't hear anyone talk about it. Let's see what it's about.
I'm gonna need Americans to stop making anime, please. Please, just don't do it. Let someone else produce it. Not you. Fuck you, Jason DeMarco. I watched the first episode of Ninja Kamui. That sucked ass. It's you could not signal tragic backstory incoming harder than they did. It was so fucking twee and corny and just flashing red lights of these people are going to die. Your family is going to die. They are going to die soon. You're being too happy right now. Your family is going to die. It's so fucking bad. It's so bad. Not even an attempt to make it more interesting. It's so fucking generic and lame. Now, the obvious selling point of this show is the animation, because it's got really intense fight scenes. Counterpoint. All of the fight choreography looks the same. There's nothing particularly complex about it. It's just a guy spinning in circles a lot and stabbing people. There was no interesting variation to the choreography. There was no pacing. There was no rhythm. It was just a dude spinning around in a circle a bunch and stabbing people. And also, the compositing makes the fight sequences feel so disconnected from the background that it doesn't even feel... It feels less real, because the characters doing the action stuff barely make contact with the environment that they're in, so it kind of just feels like they're in like a computer simulation or something. It doesn't look... It's not that good a fight, actually. These aren't good fights. They're boring. They're too close up most of the time. Not a fucking wide shot to be seen. And the compositing's not good. Oh, and this is by Sung-Hoo Park, by the way, and Ian H. Productions, his production studio. This is the guy who left Jujutsu Kaisen to do his own studio, and also did the Monsters OVA from last season that also wasn't good, but at least that was only one OVA. This is a whole TV series, and it's bad. Also, there is such a thing as too much color. There were a lot of shots where the color was like, okay, that looks interesting. This is good. I like what they're doing here. But then there are some shots where they just go too far, and it's just like, this feels icky. This feels like too saturated. It's just not quite right. But you know, this is a real be the beginning scenario though, because no matter how good it looks, there was no way I was going to continue it because the story is just so bland and corny and dumb. I hate it. Moving on.
Okay, Ninja Kamui off the list. I think we'll do 2 more randoms for this video. Let's see what we roll next. 26. Viral hit. Again, have not heard a single fucking person talking about it. If I recall from the key visual, it's going to be like an edgy YouTuber kind of thing. Okay, let's try it out.
Oh Christ, that sucked shit. I got a little bit into the first episode of Viral Hit, and I have yet to see a single fucking anime where they have a YouTuber where it's about like being a YouTuber and they actually get it right. Well, the only time I've ever seen anyone get it right is the first episode of, was that long-running Toei supernatural mystery thing. Whatever, there's like a Logan Paul-esque character in that, and the only reason they got it right was because it was super brief. None of this shit makes any goddamn sense. It's like, it's so fucking frustrating. Like, for some reason, the people who make anime have an utter contempt for YouTubers. I don't fucking know why. Maybe it's because of Logan Paul, because of the Suicide Forest thing. Maybe that's still a sentiment that is prevalent there. And you know what? Fair enough. Fair enough. Man filmed a dead body. But I need to break down how little this show actually cares about like the logic of its world. So this guy is like filming something in class, and he's very clearly using a selfie stick. Like he's holding it. You can see holding a stick, and you can see the stick going off into the distance, like where the camera would be. Like he's got his phone there, and they're like, the camera is like, the frame is like moving around a little bit like it would when you're doing like a free-handed like selfie stick kind of thing like that. But the stick isn't moving with the camera. The stick is totally stationary, but the camera is still moving. So it physically doesn't make any sense. And then a few minutes later, the main character starts getting the shit kicked out of him by a guy, and he's like, oh, this is that YouTuber's cameraman. And I was like, what do you mean his cameraman? He was using a fucking selfie stick. He was filming it himself. What the fuck? Like, this show doesn't care about YouTube. It simply doesn't. And it's a really, like, shitty attempt at getting us to empathize with this main character, because we know absolutely nothing about him until other than he is getting humiliated by being a dummy for a makeup tutorial, and he's getting the shit kicked out of him for not smiling during the video. he's just a sad sack of shit that I have no empathy towards at all because he's not a character. This show sucks ass. It sucks so much ass.
Okay, viral hit is coming off the list. I also just realized that apparently the broadcast for Whisper Me a Love Song is incomplete, and they have no clue when they're going to air the last 2 episodes. So, unfortunately, I'm going to have to save this one for a later date. It's a damn shame. I was looking forward to that. Really liked the manga. It's a shame the production fell apart. Anyway, so we're going to crank down the number generator by 2 this time. And see what we get as our last random for the video. 27. A lot of the low number stuff. STER Shiny Colors. Okay, another Idolmaster show. One of these days I'll find an Idolmaster series that I like. Maybe it's this one. Let's find out.
I'm starting to think that Idolmaster just is not the franchise for me. I got a little over halfway through the first episode of Shiny Colors, and it is so fucking boring and substanceless and soulless and corporate. I was gonna make a joke about Polygon Pictures like jump scaring me, but honestly the production is the least of this show's worries. Actually, the production is pretty okay so far. It's got some really nice lighting, although it does get a little blown out sometimes, and the character animation isn't that bad by full CG standards. But god, this show's fucking boring. I watched like 15 minutes of this and there was nothing. It had nothing there. And there's like 15 or 20 fucking characters in this. It's like they're just cramming in as many waifus as they possibly can, and they're all boring and interchangeable. None of the dialogue in this like almost with the exception of like 2 or 3 lines, none of the dialogue spoken by any of the girls aside from the main character is like unique to that character. It is all interchangeable generic bullshit about becoming an idol or training to be an idol. We got, aside from the voice acting and the character designs, there is no way you could determine anything about these characters. And, like, yes, visual and audio cues are, like, good ways to signal what a character is like, but it can also be very lazy in this instance, where it's just like, yeah, that's obviously the sporty one, that's obviously the punk one, that's obviously the cute lolly, and you don't need to know anything else. I'm sure as the show goes on, they will get a little bit more characterization, but I don't think they're gonna get much. It's so corporate and soulless and like bland, milquetoast, garbage. Also, it's like also kind of confusing. Like, I thought the main character had gotten like a rejection letter from an idol agency, but then she gets approached by a producer and she's like, no, I have to reject your invitation. Sorry, I can't be an idol. Like, I get it's supposed to be like a self-doubt kind of thing, but like, or maybe I was confused and the rejection letter was from another character, because again, there were like fucking 20 characters in the first 3 or 4 minutes of this show. Probably shorter than that, actually. So it got fucking confusing. And then, like, a minute or 2 passes, we get a little bit of a montage of her going to bed and then going to the same spot again the next day, and the producer meets her again, and she's like, I do want to be an idol, actually. What changed? Did she think about it a little bit? What did she think about? What changed her mind? Did I miss it? Did I miss something? Did I black out? Am I drunk? Are you drunk? Is this show drunk? Also, Kenjiro Tsuda showed up out of fucking nowhere as the voice of like the big boss manager. He was also the main character in Ninja Kamui. A lot of work for Kenjiro Tsuda these days, which is great because I love his voice. But I think he's starting to get into the hands of not great directors, so they're just basically doing, do the voice now. And he just does the voice. And it just, a lot of times it doesn't fit with the character that he's playing. Like, why is he the voice of the big boss man in this? And he's got like his mildly threatening Kenjiro Tsuda voice. The fuck's going on here? Bleh.
Alright, iMass Shiny Colors coming off the list. And I think it's about time for an end cap. So we're going to jump into one of the real big ones right away. Delicious in Dungeon. Man, there's been so much hype around this show. I am excited to jump in. Let's do it.
God damn, this has been a banger year for traditional fantasy anime, I'll tell you what. Just watched all of Delicious in Dungeon over the course of about 3 days. It was really fun. Really, really enjoyed that one. This has probably one of the most fascinating worlds that I've seen from a fantasy anime in a while. Just in terms of like the attention to detail, in terms of the thematic ideas that it encourages, and just the general like intrigue that it inspires. I love that I loved how obviously this is a show centered around a fantasy anime with a lot of food elements, but I also love how incredibly well developed the idea of the food is, and like the individual pieces of food and like livestock and monsters, and how in depth they get with like actual cooking concepts, and how that, and just the immense plethora of ideas that they can throw at you in terms of like, okay, we can do this with this kind of meat, we can do this with this kind of vegetable, so on and so forth. And then it just circles around to just, it's weird. It's almost like working in both directions of like the food inspires what kind of fantasy monsters and creatures exist in this world, and then the fantasy monsters inspire what kind of food they came up with to display. It's just really, really, really well crafted world building in that sense, and also in just the actual structure of this world. Like I'm sure this has been done before, but it's very rare that they actually go into like, okay, now what is a dungeon? Why is this here? Like, aside from like, oh, this was like the tomb of a king or something, and whatnot, like very generic ideas or whatever. And this show goes all in on like exploring, like, no, this dungeon is like very specifically a castle from like 1,000 years ago that somehow got buried here, and monsters started spawning around it, and there's all these different facets of how the dungeon works. The dungeon like rearranges itself, the dungeon fixes itself when there's damage or foreign objects found in it. The lunatic magician ruling over this dungeon has his own backstory that is very well detailed and well defined. Like, there's so much history to this world in just like the span of 24 episodes that's just so delicious for you to sink your teeth into, pun intended. This, like, I'm just very surprised by how world building forward this was. And it's just really fucking good world building. And it uses the concept of food in terms of like actual like main plot points, with the idea of Fallen becoming part dragon, and like the reveal at the end of like, oh, maybe we have to eat the parts of her that are dragon to turn her back to normal. The idea of reconstructing her from the thing that ate her. It's so dense with ideas about this world. You can really tell that this author loves this world that he has created and wants to explore as many facets of it as he possibly can. And boy, is he going for it. He is really shooting for it. I like that he's sort of adding some stuff to like the traditional fantasy races and whatnot. Like we have the classic like, oh, the elves and the dwarves don't get along, but there's like a little bit more detail to it about how like it's revealed that they fought like a war like a millennium ago, and now they're basically just trying to keep all their old ancient technology away from the newer races. It's just really fun stuff. Yeah. And weird thing that I noticed that I'm not like, they kind of just have like the in-universe like casual racism, which is like, you don't have that a lot in like fantasy anime. Like normally when like the like, oh, you halflings do this, tall men do this, elves do this. Normally when you have stuff like that, it's like very like they're going to like focus on like one particular race and then be like, hey, racism is bad. But with this one, it's kind of just like, I guess, casual racism in our world, sort of, where it's just like, yeah, we recognize that this is, in the end, they recognize like, hey, we probably shouldn't be talking about each other like this, but you know what? It kind of just slips out sometimes because of the immense complexity of the politics of this world that they still have only scratched the surface of. And it's weird to say that the racism made the show more interesting, but it, like, I don't know, it just fit for some reason. It just fit of like this casual, like, it made these characters feel, well, obviously it made them feel more flawed, but, and then as a result it made them feel more human and all the more interesting in the ways that they get over said racism and stuff, and just like moving past to be like, hey, I'm sorry I said that shit, I didn't mean it. And just a cool idea that you don't really see very often. And even down to like the thematic level, all the way that food is incorporated into the themes of this series, of how like this idea of consumption and nutrition and things that we take into ourselves, whether it's food or it's the relationships that we have with other people, or it's our history, so on and so forth, how that nourishes us and makes us stronger or detracts from us. It's so incredibly dense with ideas. This is just a very fascinating show to think about, which makes it a little bit more understandable that the well, I'm not going to say that. The characters are a bit simpler than normal with this type of show, but that not in the ways that like you're thinking. Like in the ways of like, there's not really any character arcs for this show. Like there's a little, Itsuzumi has a little bit of one for like an episode and a half, and you could argue that Senshi has one, but aside from that, it's more so just like the weird quirks and neuroses of these different characters bouncing off of each other and allowing them to see like new sides to how they think about things and just how they view each other and the world around them. And so it's like there's not necessarily like any like linear character growth, but it's just that the characters become more complex as they learn more from the other people that they interact with. Like Marcille is definitely not the same character she was at the start of this series, mostly because she was forced to eat so much monster food, but more so than any of that, the characters are just really fucking fun and delightful to follow. There's just the chemistry is so damn good. The way that the characters bounce off each other comedically is hilarious. I love Laios's borderline, like, the extreme social unawareness is just so funny, but also so realistic in a way. It's a very real version of the socially inept anime character. It feels like something I have seen before, and is also still incredibly comedic and funny. Yeah, man, this show really nailed it, and a lot of that also comes down to just the presentation of the show too. Like this is a Studio Trigger show from a director that I have never heard of before. As far as I know, this is his first directorial work, and most of the other stuff, like if I recall from browsing his filmography, he's mostly just. He is like exclusively a Studio Trigger employee, which obviously that makes sense since this is a Trigger production. But it's interesting that he has not worked outside this studio as far as I know, and this is his first directorial work. Phenomenal directorial debut in that case, and I think he's also doing a Dynazenon movie that's coming up. I didn't know that they had announced a Dynazenon movie until I looked at his sheet, but you know what? I'm fucking excited for that. And one of the things I admire most, aside from the incredibly cool animation for the series, is that there's so many visual, like, jokes and visual cues. Like, there is a lot about this show where it is just, like, there's a lot of explaining in this show, and this director was smart enough to go, okay, there's a lot of stuff that just has to be explained, so anything that I can just do visually and get away with, I will do visually. And it really worked, whether it's like small little jokes or like just very obvious like visual, like this is what's happening, or this is what this character is thinking, or this is the like aha moment that someone came to. I like when shows do that. It's a little, the show don't tell is very strong with this series, except for I think it's like episode 18 or 19, the dream sequence episode. It stuck out for being so not that. Like, it was just very like, oh, this is what is happening right now, and you are afraid of this for this reason, and so on and so forth. And it's like, you could have cut, like, it's not horrible, but it's like, it goes like 6 or 7 lines too far, and just undercuts a lot of the gravitas that this episode could have had, because otherwise, it could have been an incredibly powerful episode with the ideas that it talks about with Marcille's like inner demons that she is dealing with, but it just goes a little too far with the over explaining. So that was that was probably the only like major disappointment, I guess, with this show. Because other than that it's really good at just showing things and allowing the visuals to explain things. And also, it's just a really fucking cool looking show. It's got this really nice, like, semi-cartoony aesthetic, but also there's an immense amount of detail in everything. But also the animation is super, like, bouncy and explosive and just very fun to watch. One of my favorite things is watching the dragon move around. Like, it felt incredibly, like, very animalistic, and it's like, it felt like they studied some kind of animal moving around and modeled the dragon's movements off of that. It was just, that's like, it's one of my favorite, like, animation moments from the show. And also just the action animation is fucking insane. Which is not weird for a Trigger production. That's normally their bread and butter. But I was just blown away by how fucking good the action is. And also just like the design sense is so goddamn good. I love all of the character designs for this show. There's such an incredible depth of variety and specificity to these designs, and just the way that both the base designs are so strong and how the animation and like shifts in art style are able to play with those designs in fun ways. Just really damn good. Also, Marcel is really cute. That cannot be understated. This has been a great year for elf girls so far, between Marcel and Frieren. There's probably going to be some more coming up. Damn, this show is fucking good. I'm very, very excited for whenever season 2 comes out. I believe this season got about halfway through the manga. And so if the next season is another 24, if it's another 2-core season, then that'll probably wrap up the story, which would be nice. A nice like 48 to 50 episode complete story. Just you don't get a lot of those lately. It's like, it's big and beefy, so there's a lot to it, but you'll still have like a conclusion. That's gonna be fun to see. Yeah, if you are really into like dense world building kind of shows, and also want to see, wow, anime food looks so good. But actually the cooking was really fucking good in this show. Yeah, the Delicious in Dungeon, very fucking good.
Alright, Delicious in Dungeon is complete. We're going to scroll all the way up to the top end of this list and put it in the number 3 spot for now, just barely above Apothecary Diaries with a light 9. Although I am currently rewatching Apothecary Diaries with my family. We'll see if this arrangement stays as is for now, but as is, Delicious in Dungeon, very fucking good.